to coming to join to our workshop, our space. I will be with a very good companion, of course, with Jaakko. We will introduce him in relation to the book and the workshop in a minute. Today we will be in a presentation of a book. The book is a book on dialogue. This is the first time that I translate my work into English. So the book is in English. It's for me very new to see my voice, my own voice in English. So we will tell something about that. I brought some books, the ones I could brought to the conference. So it's my desire, my deepest desire to share my work. It's my fifth book in my career as a writer. This is a book on dialogue. It's about dialogue. It's in relation with dialogical practices. Also with my literature career. I will tell you something about that. The book is on sale, so if somebody wants to have the book, of course it's available in that way to share the work, to share and for first time in an international community. I am very proud that that international community is this international community of dialogical practices. I would like, Jaakko, if it is okay to you, to say some little words regarding the book, and then open the space for Jaakko, who is here with me. That is very important for me. Also, I think for the space that we are sharing. I get in touch with Jaakko and with Elisa too, with my wife, and is here with me. Many years ago, 13 years ago, after a crisis, when I went through with psychotic experiences. Before of that, I was a student. I made a degree in literature. I also taught in Russian literature and European literature of 19th century. So my orientation was theories. I was very into the theory. With this aspect, I would like to say one or two little things, and then open to Jaakko's words. On one hand, I would like to say that studying and theory was, for me, a process of healing since I was very young. As the back of the book says, at some point of my life, I get disconnected of reality. I think that that experience happens to me for maybe two reasons that are in relation. One is intergenerational transmission of trauma. My grandfather is a survivor of concentration camps. My other grandfathers are orphans, also from the war, First World War. And when I was 8 years old, I went through an abusive situation into my family. I suffered an abuse. So when it took me many years to connect myself with the outside world, and I think the path that I found to do it was humanities, things, and into the humanistic field. Which I found many years after, because my family was in relation to commerce mostly, at least the mainstream of the family. The other thing I can say is that two things, the other two things briefly. One is that I studied Bakhtin at the university in this context. I was very impressed by Bakhtin's theory, and I thought about that when I was a teacher. The other thing is that I was trained to think concepts as problems, as a problematic, not from the outside, instead from the inside of the problem, like being into the problem and thinking more like a kind of Dostoevsky character. In that search, studying very deeply way of studying and being in relation to things, to thinking, I get into a crisis. After when I began to recover, when I was already fine, I began to work again. And I was called by a woman, a teacher from Buenos Aires, Dora Fried-Schnittmann, in the Interface Foundation. To teach Bakhtin for therapists, lawyers, judge, mediators. I met Elisa in that context. Well, we have a love relation. We engage in a very love and profound way. I think this is in relation with theory too, because it's very present, healing through love in Dostoevsky's novels and also in Bakhtin theory. And then we met together Jaakko Seikkula in Buenos Aires in this context, in Interface. I was very impressed by Jaakko, by his way of explaining theory, to think the relation between theory and the relation with the other as a healing process. So I think I was very lucky in that context. To meet Elisa and to meet Jaakko. And I think also that it was possible to me, the relation with Jaakko, and it is still possible to think in a theoretical way, in a problematic way of thinking, because thinking concepts as problems is an horizontal way of thinking, because you don't depend on the authority of the other. You are thinking by your own, in your deepest way of, that you can do it. Can I say it again? Okay. Sorry. I think in the relation, I think I had two teachers in my life with whom I could find a way of being in relation, thinking with freedom. Because thinking concepts as problems, as problematics, requires an horizontal way of thinking, because you are thinking by yourself. And that is the last thing I would say before Jaakko could share some ideas with us. And then we will see some PowerPoints, 3 quotes of the book. And I'm introducing this aspect of problematics because I choose for today not to share basic aspects of dialogue. Because I feel and I think that in this conference many of us we know already some basic aspects of dialogue. Of course, it's a good place to share that aspect too, because they are introductory to our fields. But I choose, because it's also my way of thinking, one introductory problem and two problems. Two problems that could be introduce us to different discussions. So, if you agree, and Jaakko is also agree, I would like to share those quotes and share first one quote, then share some ideas, some dialogue between the group, then another quote, again share some thoughts, and then the third quote, and then we'll see the time and how we are at the moment. Okay, thank you for the moment, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for inviting and organizing this workshop. And of course, I feel very honored for the invitation to write something that actually was written in a Spanish book, and the Spanish book was meant to be an epilogue, published as an epilogue of the book, but in the English version is the prologue. And I don't know what does it mean, or if it means anything, but it's a very, very exceptional. I thought to share perhaps 4 very short pieces about the prologue that I wrote. First notion that I wrote that the style of Martin is very faithful to the idea of dialogue, which is a continuum in the river of expressions and responses that become new expressions and wait for a reply to become an expressions again. 3 dots. In this book, Martin has found a way to earn this flow. And his way of writing is very poetic. He says, for instance, we look at each other looking, we are without being. Then I write. When I read this sentence, I thought about its deep meaning and remembered Ahtin's phrase when he says that we see ourselves in the eyes of another. In some phase, I have a citation of where Martin defines dialogue. Perhaps this defines is a bit in parentheses, but his understanding of dialogue when he said that dialogue is a method that goes beyond what each of us thinks. Dialogue is a method of balance. A method of balance that involves being able to lose your balance. And for me, while reading this book, I think that it's very interesting because it illustrates Martin's ability to handle a lot of information at the same time. As dialogue itself. But if we are true to this book, perhaps it's not just a personal skill, but rather the capacity of relational life and a creative drive for literature. And then in the very end, I wrote with this my recommendation for everyone to read. I really recommend to read it. You can never grasp even if Martin is good in presenting it, but reading is a totally different, a new experience. My advice that when you read it, please devote time to reading his phrases slowly, without the urge to hurry to reach the end of the book. And each sentence has its own word and lives not only in words but in its whole expression. And for me, reading this, I got in my mind another great Russian novelist, Anton Chekhov. I don't know if you are familiar with his text, because in every sentence there is a word inside. And when I read the text of Martin, it's the same. I have the same feeling that in every phrase, every sentence, there is a word inside. So Martin, I'm very curious to hear your
will see the citations, and I will ask you, Jaakko, for help to coordinate, to share your impressions, your ideas about the citations, because there might be somehow discussions.
Yes.
Share discussions, possibly share discussions.
And we would invite, after every citation, people to share some of their comments.
Yeah.
Yes, we would.
I think one of the reasons why the prologue in the version, in the Spanish version is epilogue and the English version is prologue, is there are different reasons. One is the relation between local and international. That is a very special relation to explore, and the book tries to go into that as we are in our life. But also because many people told me you should put that in, at first, because that recommendation is what I needed to know before read the book. That it's okay to read it slowly, because I need to do it. I need to do it like that. Yeah. I would ask for help, maybe to read the quotations. I would ask first to Antonio if it's possible, if you want to support me reading the one, this for example, or somebody who is volunteer who wanted to share his voice. Yes?
On the one hand, we have obstacles and problems. On the other, issues that give rise to process. In both ways, we are part of a dialogue, one that is more fluent and the other more of a standstill. The dialogic model tends to understand the fluent one and tries to infuse it with dynamicism. The traditional Western model believes in power and in the fact that voices are embodied by people who need to uphold their point of view in order to sustain their power, their homeland, their family, their name, and their history. I think that between these two dynamics, there is a dialectical dynamic where one needs the other, and hence there are complementaries. The perpetual itself, the dialogic model, needs both perspectives. The power dynamics by itself is not fluent but conflictive, while the dialogical dynamic by itself cannot stand in a cruel and market-driven reality. It is like the dialogue between the cross and the serpent, which is weak and which is strong.
So Martin, when I read and listen to this citation, my first thought is a kind of a question to you. Could you say some more words about this dialectical dynamic? What are the parts in the dialectical dynamics?
What are the parts?
Yes. You illustrate one that is more fluent and the other more standstill.
Yes. I think it's something that I worried about, and I wonder during the book why there is a dialogical position that we understand and we share, and that we think that is better, but at the same time we need to think that we are in a better position. We used to exclude of our. It's okay. We need to exclude other position, like if it were something that is outside us, that that is the opposite position, the position of power, the position of rigidity, that things. I think we are in the right side of the dialectic. But being on that side, we need to think that there is a dialogue between those positions, so the other position is also into us, and it's part also of the human being.
Like a power, like having a power and losing the power of something.
Yes, but I wonder what is the power? The power is being dynamic, or the power is being solid, like a warrior, a freeze warrior in the arm, with in the armed, or more dynamic, like something that is in movement. What is power? Because it will change from the way we are looking the situation. Both have a power.
And like the parte is speaking about this authoritative voice which stops all dialogue and comes into a monologue. From outside defining how you should think, how you should work, how you should do. How would you have dialogue in power? Or how would you make a kind of a dialogical power?
I think it's very difficult. I think it's really difficult, and it's a kind of activism of the everyday life. For me, this is also the cover of the book, the Oriental way of thinking, that is something circular, that is of movement, because I think we need to be able to talk with people who think different, who act different, who have different kind of ways of thinking power, or health, also health, and it challenges us in our feelings. But that those dialogues are also very important, and when you are on dialogue, when you are on the field of the dialogue, you don't know if you are right or wrong. You need to forget for a moment what is happening to you, and to be able to be there in the present, in the field with the other, just being on dialogue, also with the things that you think are wrong, and accept that maybe the other is right, because it's a person with feeling, with history.
Yes. Perhaps one part of this urge to have power, or urge to have control, is to think that we are in processes, that something that we are living through is a process. But in the end, Consorte was very occupied of that, as I also think that life is not process. It's like happenings of occasions, and that's what, when I read your book, it's very much the same idea. You all of a sudden can give, without any motivation, a sentence of something, and then you invite the reader to be in a very powerless situation. What is this? Where does it come from? And then only to accept, okay, here it is. But when being in a dialogue dialogical experience, perhaps we do not need that much a kind of control, or we do not need so much to think that this is a part of the process in this and that phase, but that is the point of time that we are living through. I don't know if there are people who were in the working group. I'm not of course today, yes, and we had a lot of conversations about the feeling of the meaning of dialogue for well-being, and today we had a lot of discussion about it, that how come it happens that in the middle of suffering there all of a sudden emerged the deepest experience of dialogue. As for instance, when the pandemic started, I wrote a short text saying that this is the most dialogical phase of life ever we have been living. All of a sudden, in the misery, in the catastrophe of the entire world, we can be living a kind of connectedness to each other. Mm.
I have some reflection on that.
Mm.
Yeah. I think crises are very dialogical. As I agree, I had the same feeling during the COVID crisis. I said conference, but maybe because conferences of dialogical practices were for me always a place of movement.
Yes.
My reflection is that if crises have movement, crises also tend to move after the crisis to the other place, to the opposite.
Mm.
Revolutions to right wing, revolutions to dictatorships, dictatorships to revolutions. So that's why I think that they might be.
Yeah, of course, that's dialectics of
that's the idea that it's not developed in that portrait between the cross and the serpent.
Yes.
It's something that is also in relation with the health system, the Esculapio bastón, el bastón de Esculapio, who can translate. The cross and the serpent and the bastón de Esculapio of the ambulances. So something solid and rigid, like a cross, time, space, order, and the other thing that is more multidimensional.
But I actually started to think more about this, that we all have experiences, for instance, of sadness, losing someone that we love, and then we come together and have funerals, and perhaps these are the most powerful dialogical experiences that we have in our lives on the whole, because we feel so connected, we feel so near to close to each other, and it's also a part of the dialectics of the life.
Yeah. Being connected is something very important to be a movement.
Could this be a time to...
Yeah, I think we can open to share voices and feelings, and then we continue on your point. Yeah. Somebody? Yeah. It's open.
I felt very touched by your paragraph about this. I sense in it fear, this fear that the other systems, the system of fighting and markets and having to fight to survive, could overcome the world we want to build with networks and dialogue and being open to each other and supporting each other. So I'm still in this zone at the moment.
Thank you. I have a feeling of what you said to us. Yeah, no, it's already. I would like to ask translation for me in Spanish, if it's possible, because I would like to keep some details of what you tell. Is it possible? Can you help me, Elisa, if possible?
No sé si voy a poder ayudarte porque no
you can translate it to me in your words.
como que se sintió muy tocada por lo que escuchó y que se pregunta cómo hacer con las peleas, con los espacios pero no, estaba más conectada con la afirmación.
Okay.
Something related with the fear. You said something about the fear.
Yeah.
Could you repeat, please?
The fear.
Yeah.
It's a fear that the world I want to have, the open dialogue, the supporting each other, that taking everybody as an equal human being, might be the one losing in this balance between the two worlds, where the other world is the one fighting power, war, especially maybe it adds to it. I worked for 20 years in Ukraine. That might add to my fear.
I think, for me, I think about moving between two worlds almost. And for me, it's easy when I go into the world that's scary, I put a different coat on. But I think if that world had associations with trauma, that would be a very different experience. Yeah. But I've grown up with that harsh world, so I've learned to have a different coat on it with it.
The word coton is like
A metaphor, for putting armor.
The same that I tried to share before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when I go away and I'm surrounded by people like this, like family, when we're doing our training, I just living in this wonderful world of dialogue and then go back to life as usual. Yeah, that's when I put my coat on.
I mean, I think for me, it talks about what we were talking yesterday about, the fight and the struggle about the interpersonal dialogue that I have, right? Sometimes my thoughts and my heads are stronger than my heart, right? So it's always that balance and that fight, which one becomes the powerful, which one, I think sometimes my head helps me with that feeling of being well, and sometimes it's the heart, right? So it's a battle of the two, and at the end, dialogue, which one is speaking, right? Is it the heart? Is it sharing the emotion and the feelings? Or is it my head that is being destructive and not able to take the pain and the suffering? So it's a protector, right? You know, and the image that I get is this, you know, river, right? That has all this energy that it's flowing through everything, and then it comes to an end where it flows out to the different rivers and it feeds, you know, the communities, and it brings life to the, you know, to the communities, because the storm has settled into something calm and quiet and peaceful.
Okay.
Thought came up into my mind when Mike described these differences about the lovely place of meeting and then the reality. And once we had a project of open dialogue in Sweden, and we met with a young man who had a very bad situation in his life. He was living in a community for young adults who had a drug problems and drug abuse problem, and he got often psychotic episodes also. But still, after I don't know how many years, more than 20 years ago, when we had this project and we had the first meeting with him, with his mother, and with the team, it was a very remarkable experience in many ways. And then they went on having these meetings, and the team said that he came into 3 meetings, and thereafter he stopped. That they could not reach him, they could not motivate him. But because it was a part of a research project, they met with him in the follow-up interview one year after. And in the follow-up interview, he said that when people asked that you were in these meetings 3 times, but thereafter you did not want to come. And then he responded, well, you know, these meetings, these 3 meetings that I had were the best experience in my entire life. It was a very moving history. But you know, my life is a hell. And then I realized that the distance between this meeting being in heaven and going back to the hell became too long for me, and I couldn't stand it. And therefore, to protect myself, I stopped this meeting. So that's one part of this dialectics that we are living in.
And did he find a new way? Sorry. I'll try to talk slowly.
No, I'm just translating what I said, and then on říkala, já jsem si chvíli, ale já prostě žiju, že jsem už právě taková, protože taková, já nedokážu, jsem prostě říkám, že to jde, já jsem na chvilku vlastně a už se vrátit. Prostě, že ten rozdíl je rozlouky a to zvládnu.
I'm just curious if he found another coat to put on.
I don't know, perhaps his life became a bit better about it.
This fear of not speaking everyone. I just want to tell that when I come back to Norway now, I
I go and listen to a man who is playing the text of Petroni in a one-man's act. And he is playing his novel, I think it's a novel called This is a Man. And that is one of the strongest texts we have in Western civilization, if you can call it civilization. Western countries, I would say one of the strongest, because when he came out of the camps, the concentration camps, he was an Italian Jew, and he saved his life because he was a geneticist. So they needed him in the camps to do the work for them. So he saved his, he came out alive. And when he came out, he was so filled with this life of the difference. And he met people around, came back to Italy. And he met people on the train and on the roads, on the outside. He could not understand, he could not, excuse me for a moment. So he couldn't understand that it was not possible to talk with other people. There was no one to talk with. Everyone talked about what will we do tomorrow, how can we restore our houses, how can we make our gardens, like nothing like that. So for him, it was he actually couldn't understand how is it possible. He tried everywhere to start to talk with someone, but he didn't succeed. So he didn't find a meaning. He didn't find anyone to share with. So he didn't find anyone to share with, or to share and dialogue or talk with. So he lost his hope.
I think maybe two little things, and then maybe we can continue to share one quote, maybe because of time and because I think it's a nice encounter of sharing and in relation to this, I think that that writings is a way of connection with people who is alone, and their arts are a way of connection. I think it's in relation with also with my own, what I tried to share before, of course, as a nieto, as a grandson of survivors, but I needed to find that kind of way, and I think also Primo Levi found a way through writings to connect, to communicate and connect, and then became open to the world who feels like to him, possibly, and in a process of cultural process. Okay, Alexandra. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, Alexandra. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Are we on time? This I think with time.
No, for the people it's okay, but I have to help him before it starts.
Okay. And it was really very, I think it's very well communicated through us, the idea of that balance and the fight of dialogue between other words, and that question is what I explore deeply in the book also, in my own searching and intent to understand and to share this. If I remember well, in Spanish, I said the metaphor of the idea of a valvula. I think in English could be hink. Is it okay? It's a hink. I don't know. If it was here, but it's something that could communicate those both fields that are separated, mind and heart.
Like a valve?
A valve.
Valve,
Yeah, a
it's
valve.
okay, valve.
Yeah. Something that could communicate those words that seems to be separate, but they need one to the other. That is the idea of dialectical. Yeah, dialectics. The quotes I would not share at this moment because of time are in relation with the idea of facilitate dialogues between people who are victims and people who are victimaries, who are perpetrators. I think it's a very polemic aspect of dialogue, but I think that it's an impossible dialogue that could support processes of healing in the intent of produce that kind of dialogue. The ideas of dialogue in which I am inspired are in a way they are extreme ideas of dialogue, and they are also sources of Bakhtin theory. There was a Jewish German theoric of the 19th century named Hermann Cohen,
It's cone in English. Cone. In English is cone. Hermann Cohen.
Esto lo muestro ahora. That said that in a discussion between Germans and Jewish people, German says that Jewish does not belong to German laws, and Jewish people says that because they say that the Jewish law doesn't include German people. He argued that the idea of loving the people who are with us, amar a tu prójimo como a ti mismo. ¿Alguien recuerda el precepto en inglés? Ama a tu prójimo.
To love your neighbor as you love yourself, but it's not neighbor the word. It's like to love your neighbor as you love yourself, but it's not neighbor.
As you love the other as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Not the others.
Yeah.
To love the others the way you love yourself.
Yes, that.
El próximo, ama a tu prójimo. He says the idea of prójimo is
the other.
The other is not the other that is close to me. The other is the other that is far away from me. The most far other than me. The enemy. You need to love the enemy as you love yourself. That is the real meaning of the sentence. That is a real challenge to include the other, the different, the most different into your system, because it ability to be on permanent transformation of your own system. You need to open your system and to integrate the difference. It is a permanent movement and transformation. So I decided I wanted to share one idea which I thought about, that it was a polemic idea in the last conference which I collaborated in the organization. That is what happened with dialogue in violent situation. Does dialogue end when there is violence? Does dialogue end when there is violence? Or is it possible to understand that violence is also part of dialogue, the most far away, with whom I think the other doesn't have chance of dialogue? Because it's the one that is outside of my idea of dialogue, but I am outside of his idea of dialogue. So there is a real dialogue for me to have, to be. Yeah. So this is maybe how I express in some words that idea, but it's a long part of the book where I think and I try to think and I try to think how to say that in a mature way to be able to dialogue with our companions, that maybe they think that with violence dialogue ends. That is very understandable. But for people who suffer violence in our lives, who went through crisis, psychotic crisis in our lives, we know that dialogue need to be in relation with violence in somehow, because psychotic crises are violent, for example. An idea which I did not agree at the Dialogue Conference in Buenos Aires, which had a lot of acceptance in the community at this moment, in the group that we were sharing, but which I strongly argued against, almost by myself, is that there is a moral and ethical stance of the one who dialogues, linked to democracies, and a consensus of the good, which implies that those who deviate from that do not engage in dialogue. When violence ensues, for example, a moment when dialogue ends. Everything is dialogue, even pain. Theories of dialogue must also embrace separation. someone ought to do it. Vaccine theory embraces both empathy and extraposition, both the perspective that conforms, as well as the one that separates, are parts of the aesthetic and the ontological outlook of people. The main idea is okay, so it's okay. It's something that two concepts of acting, but the main idea is the same. I think that what is excluded is a key to transforming the system. The inclusion of white and dark is vital for movement. Differences need to be recognized. I know it's difficult, it's something visceral, it could be difficult for people to understand that idea or to share that idea. I'm sorry if I bother someone saying that. For me it's very important to include the differences, include the difference. It's very, very important, not only for me, because my history, I also think that it's important for theory. I also think that it's important for the feeling that we are in a conference of dialogue, but then we will be in the real life, and I don't know how to connect one to the other. I think we need to connect it in ourselves, including that experience here and that experience there. That is a way to embrace dialogue as a way of life. That is my own perspective. So maybe we'll have a couple of minutes. I don't know if you agree or if you feel something that you want to share. You feel interpolated or you want to share some comment or feeling, whatever. I am open. And do we have a minute or we have 3 minutes? Okay.
8 minutes.
Do you feel okay?
8 minutes?
Yes.
Oh.
8 minutes? Okay. Okay. So it's open to come.
I don't know what is the step.
Yeah.
I'm very glad you said that about the violence, because I was working with violent people for more than 4 years in a program, and my experience with them, the violence, the reasons why they are screaming and hitting other people, is because they want to be heard, to be understood, to be heard. And they do not know the other ways how to make it to be heard by other people. And it was very crucial in the program. They had a chance to say, or to scream, but they were heard and they could change their way how they express, and they learned how to express their needs. And that was really crucial.
Very good, very brave. I think it's very difficult to be able to be open. To be open to dialogue with somebody who is violent, because you need training to do it. Yeah. Are you leaving, Jaakko?
No, I'm
okay. Yeah.
There's a narrative therapist, I forget his name, but he wrote a very nice book about taking responsibility for violence that enabled the work, enabled the dialogue but it was important that responsibility was addressed about someone's actions, you know, that they could take responsibility for it. And then he was doing some really nice work with perpetrators of violence.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah,
what I'm
I
saying?
think I understand something, not all because of the dynamic of the time at the moment, but I think one of the most difficult things is to have a dialogue with a perpetrator, and it's difficult. I don't know if was that something that you were saying, that it's difficult. It's more difficult for the perpetrator to be able to have a dialogue than for the victim, in my experience. I don't know if this in relation was something that you were saying. Is it? No.
Yeah. And maybe before you can really start, that they have to accept that they perpetrated the violence. You know, they were responsible for it.
Okay.
For me, this is also, I was thinking about this, like dialogue, whether dialogue ends with the violence or not. And I had this, I thought about it, like for instance what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine. In a way, it's also like there are ways of dialogue that I don't agree with. But for instance, if you look what's happening in Russian politics now, they have some kind of dialogue using the power also, and it's a dialogue. And I, like when, let's say, Prigozhin says, send me more weapons and whatever, it's a distorted, it's using power, but it's also like a way of dialogue.
Yeah.
So it's maybe some way, I was thinking this is maybe a way of having a dialogue, but is it the way of dialogue that we want? And when we do open dialogue, obviously we want different type of dialogue, which maybe enables perpetrator not to scream, or a violent person, but talk about it. That's maybe the step. So that I was thinking about this when you read your text.
Thank you for sharing.
She asked me to say in Czech, že jsem přemýšlel o tom, že jak to násilí je taky způsob dialogu. A to, co se třeba teď děje mezi Ruskem a Ukrajinou, že je taky jako jistá forma dialogu. Se díváme třeba, co se děje v ruské politice, jak se přetahují mezi sebou. To je forma, jak vlastně spolu jsou v dialogu. Jo? A že to vlastně se přemýšlel, že to je prostě jistá forma dialogu a v čem se liší od otevřeného dialogu, který chceme mít. Třeba forma, což je jiná třeba forma dialogu, nebo něco takového, která třeba nám umožní, že ten člověk, ten pachatel nebo nějaký násilník, kterým tady přede mnou místo, aby křičel, aby ho lidi slyšeli, tak najednou to dokáže říct jinak. Co to je v tom otevřeném dialogu, co dokáže tohle posunout. A po těchto věcech jsem přemýšlel, když to četl.
We are in the last moment of the encounter. I would love to know, Jaakko, if you have only one word in relation to this. I know that we need to end, but it's an opportunity to know if you can make a little synthesis of.
Well, this has been a very powerful experience, but perhaps as in any good dialogue, so things are open, and a lot of things happens in our mind when we leave this room. That's what I think. So
when we leave?
When we leave the room, so there's dialogues.
Okay, that's how
never
we
closed, but it goes on.
Thank you very much.
in our thoughts, and perhaps we discuss with each other also.
Very, muy sabio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. The books are on sale. So if you want the book, I would be very grateful for you with you. Well, they are 500 crowns or 35 euros. So that's the price. Yeah, it's okay.